Welcome to Rich Conversations. Today we'll chat with Matt Bones, who's a member of the experimental pop group Bonelang. Fun fact, Matt's creative partner, Sammy Saab, was the very first guest on this podcast. During this conversation, we talked about his experience in Chicago, especially the music scene. I was really curious about that. And we even get into philosophy when I ask him about the books that have influenced him. It's a really great listen. I'm excited to share this with you. There have been 4 artists in my constant rotation musically since April. The Beatles, Harry Styles, Miami Horror, and Bonelang. You gotta check them out. They make some really great music. You can follow them at Bonelang and at MattBonesDIY. Let's begin. All right, so today we have Matt Bones here.
How's it going?
And so actually the first episode of this podcast was Sammy Saab, who's one half of Bonelang, which you are the other half.
That's absolutely right, yeah. And
we were going to do it in the studio, but you got some drywall going up or something?
I don't know. What version of the story do you want to hear? Is it a long one? Because we had a leak. Some drywall had to get replaced.
Okay.
Long story short, this was the only time they could do it, so now we've commandeered our neighbor's apartment.
Yeah, so we're in his neighbor's place right now.
So don't compliment me on the decor. Compliment Sebastian.
So how long have you lived in Chicago?
Chicago proper since I was 18 for college, but I've lived within 40 miles of here my whole life, basically. So I grew up in Bolingbrook, Naperville.
Okay.
And my parents are kind of Chicago kids as well. My mom was born in Chicago. My dad was born in Warrenville. So, it's just the whole family's here. We don't have that. I know a lot of families have to travel for the holidays. It's like everybody's
right
in
here.
St. Charles is the furthest away,
So how did you and Sammy meet?
Sammy he bounced around a lot more, but we went to the same middle school.
Oh,
Met in a home ec class for the first time. And and we didn't really talk to each other then, but then we have a mutual friend, Kyle Jackson, who was putting together a rock band. Okay. Sammy wanted to play bass, and I could kind of do the falsetto Brian Johnson AC/DC thing.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's what attracted Kyle to me, so I was supposed to be the vocalist. And then I ended up just being too nervous to do that in front of people when I was a 7th grader.
Okay.
That was our first. Oh man, I don't even know what year that would have been.
Interesting.
2008 or something.
2008, and now you guys are in Albany Park. Describe Albany Park for listeners.
Albany Park is it's a very neighborhood, by which I mean there's not a lot of nightlife. It feels very working class and residential, which is nice. It's quiet, and I don't know. There's a nice balance of there's quiet, but there's still stuff to do. But it's not. You wouldn't go out probably in Albany Park. You might go to the local bar or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But you're not going to come here for dancing or something like that. It's I think. Don't quote me on this, but I read somewhere that it was the most ethnically diverse neighborhood in Chicago. So it's this massive neighborhood of all sorts of different immigrants, and it's kind of fun to walk. If you walk north from here, you can kind of feel the different stripes as you walk past restaurants and stuff. Like where we are now, there's a lot of Ecuadorian folks.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I learned this because they had their equivalent of the 4th of July parade through here one time, and everyone was wearing the same colors, and I was like, what is this? And I found out massive Ecuadorian population. And then you go a couple blocks north, and it's mostly, you'll see a lot of Mediterranean restaurants and stuff like that. It's a lot of Middle Eastern or kind of people from the Levant. Okay. And then you get further north, and it's mostly Indian, Pakistani sort of thing. So it's fun. It's a cool place to tool around because it kind of changes.
And just people, it feels like every time I'm over here, there's always there's construction everywhere in the city all the time. Yeah. But here, it always seems like they're doing construction.
Yeah. And it seems you can tell the neighborhood's like healthily growing.
Yeah.
We've been here for like 6 or 7 years, and it doesn't feel like it's blowing up in like an artificial way.
Yeah. In like a real way.
Yeah,
Like it's.
Mm-hmm. And it was kind of, I don't know, it was like pretty crime heavy maybe a decade or so ago. You'll still see gasps of like gang activity and stuff like that, but that seems to have mostly mellowed out.
Okay.
That sort of thing. So yeah.
Yeah. So if you have an open day, how do you choose to spend it?
This might be kind of an unsatisfying answer because it's not very luxurious. But I realized a while ago that like whenever, I don't know if you experience anxiety much. I don't have like anxiety issues, but just like low level anxiety can kind of kill productivity or just mood or whatever. And I realized a long time ago that if I find that a lot of my anxiety is a symptom of just like leaving things unfinished, or there's something I know I should be doing that I haven't gotten around to. Like, I should have filled out that tax form 3 months ago, and it's just like sitting in a drawer somewhere. And somewhere in the back, I'm not thinking about it consciously, but somewhere in the back of my mind, it's bothering me. So a lot of my free days are what I call life admin, where it's just like weird little bullshitty tasks that need to get done, stuff like that.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So because that's something that's been on my mind. So I just moved in with Ken Ferguson, and moving in, there's always like something new that I gotta take care of, and then once I finally complete it, there's like another thing that goes on my mind, and it's just like this never-ending like administrative task that I hate doing and I don't want to do, and it's like it's just always on my mind.
And I like my temperament. I enjoy solving problems. It's like kind of a hobby, is just like fixing shit or figuring out what's wrong with something or whatever. And so like that, again, like I would sort of expect someone to say like, oh, I like to hang out on the beach on my free days, but like I really enjoy kind of setting things straight or like improving things in a tiny way. So that's
I don't like fixing things.
Kind of. Really,
I just want things to just work.
Gotcha.
So like I've expressed my just.
Well, but that's the payoff of fixing things. I enjoy the process though too. It's not just.
But every time I'm trying to fix stuff, I'm like, I could be spending my time doing something else.
For sure.
Yeah, but.
Well, I like figuring out how things work enough.
Ooh. Nice. So we have this big clock. Nobody can see it on the. So you enjoy just on a open day, like, just getting life administrative tasks completed.
Yeah, isn't that strange? That's such an adult answer too. Well, and I also like, in terms of fixing stuff, I like figuring out how stuff works. So a lot of the times, like part of the payoff of doing, like we recently had, our drummer Zach bought a house recently, and he had some crazy electrical problems where it's like you turn on this light switch and like a light switch on the other side of the house turns on and stuff like that. Nice. And he's like, hey, can you like come help? Which sounds like a chore, but to me that's my friend calling me and being like, hey, do you want to solve a puzzle?
Really?
You know what I mean? Yeah, I find stuff like that fascinating.
Wow.
Just root around the walls and start unplugging stuff.
Interesting. I haven't gotten that answer yet on the podcast.
There you go.
So when you think of Chicago, what colors do you imagine first?
Black and orange.
Black and orange. So this is October. It's not. Is it a Halloween thing?
It might just be. I mean, we are sitting at an orange table. Yeah. Well, the black, I feel like I've got a handle on. That's like for a whole chunk of my childhood, the Sears Tower was like hugely identified with Chicago because as a kid, like when you come to the city, well, you're not going to like go to the bars.
Yeah.
So like the stuff that I would do with my parents was the very like touristy stuff, and especially when I was young, this would have been like late '90s. Sears Tower was still the tallest building in the world. People were hype about that.
Yeah.
And so like it has a very distinctive shade of like kind of ugly bluish black to it that feels like Chicago to me.
I don't know. I know exactly what you're talking about with that, like black with the Sears Tower.
Yeah.
And, like,
it's kind of like sooty. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It looks like stone almost more than it looks like metal to me.
So why orange then?
That was more of a knee-jerk reaction. I don't know. I think Is the Chicago Fire's new logo orange? I think it's kind of orange looking, right?
Is
Have
it?
you seen it? It's very controversial. I don't know if you heard about this.
It's
They
controversial?
rebranded. Well,
Why?
they rebranded and just a lot of people don't like it. And they had their old logo was like the Chicago Firefighters badge, I think.
Yeah,
And so,
I always thought it was like a what do you call it? CFD like
yeah.
logo. Yeah.
Mhm. And then so I think a lot of people were attached to it for that reason. And then they came out with this very like minimalist design,
Okay.
which I think is cool, but a lot of people were bothered by. And for now, I don't know, for the last year since they came out with that now it just lives in my... I'm not even a soccer fan. It just lives in my head as like the Chicago insignia.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what neurosis that is that I've picked up. But
Nice. So you've been here how many years? Well, most of your life, but in the proper, you said how many years?
11 years, I guess.
11, wow.
Yeah.
What would you say your proudest moment as a Chicagoan is?
Well, I've been proud of the city before, but proud's... I always think proud is a strange word for something you didn't do. You know, like... There was a great sense of pride. For instance, like when the Cubs won the World Series, that was such a crazy historical event that has to be like one of the first things you think of when somebody asks that question. Is just having watched people like live and die, like their whole lives go by as Cub fans, and then finally to like be there for the moment that happens for the city after 104 years or whatever, was bonkers. But that's also proud. Like I said, feels funny because I didn't do anything. I was just there. So I suppose there are two answers, and I guess the other one is maybe just being a musician from Chicago, like kind of spreading the Chicago music gospel. Like it's well known in other scenes. You'll pick up as you tour more that Chicago is known for just having absolutely killing musicians. Like they're kind of Chicagoans are sort of despised in LA because they show up and they suck up all the work.
Really?
Yeah.
Wait, so
like,
tell me more.
notorious.
Tell me more about this. So you and Sammy and two other guys, you guys are in Bonelang, and you're touring across the country. What is that like? Because in a way, you're representing Chicago and the music here that you've soaked up and learned from. So Chicago has a reputation for music.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's the reverse is true. So I won't name any other cities that you go to, but it's just you go somewhere else and you're like, oh, these people are... You know, you go to a jazz jam or something like that, and it's just nothing like being here and seeing, you know, there's just hundreds and hundreds of unbelievable musicians here. And it's way harder to find quality, especially like jazz jams, just hangs, that sort of thing in other cities. Same with the rock scene, although I really haven't been involved in the rock scene in Chicago for a long time. But yeah, Chicago's just a murderer's row of musicians. It's ridiculous.
Wow.
It has that reputation. It's like New Orleans or Chicago or New York all have this reputation as well. Like, it's deserved, you know, it's well earned.
So is there ever like Chicago, LA music? Is there kind of like a rivalry, or does Chicago have a rivalry with any city music-wise, or?
Not from the Chicagoans' perspective, because nobody's trying to come here to do this thing. I mean, people come to Chicago to make music, but I don't think it's seen as rivalrous.
Okay.
It's more just, hey, there's more people to play with. In LA, music is much more of an industry and an economy in LA, and so when people show up, it may shrink the pool of work that you could get, you know what I mean?
Oh, okay.
And I mean, it's a different scene too, because LA musicians are all session cats, which is kind of it's a different gig than playing live. Or touring.
What do you mean? Oh, session cats. So they're sitting in on recordings and
so they play on records and stuff like that, it's a different skill set because the main difference is, well, there's like weird idiosyncrasies of recording, like you have to be good playing to a click track or something, which takes, most drummers worth their salt can do, but that takes a while to get really, really good at. And just kind of the flow of how a session works and understanding what different terminology means and stuff like that. But it's also pretty much everything is sight read. So if you're recording a string section, you bring the parts, give them to the string section. That's the first time they've ever seen this piece of music. And you go 1, 2, 3, 4, and they have to play the whole thing end to end. And like, there's a lot of editing involved as well, but it's just, that's a very particular skill set, is being able to do that. Like, now, play that perfectly now, you know.
I'm just curious about the music scene here in Chicago and how like your involvement in it, you have been participating in it. What's something that someone on the outside wouldn't know about the Chicago music scene?
That's a good question. It's I don't want to use the word cliquey because that makes it sound like people aren't talking to each other, but there are kind of pockets of musicians.
Okay.
And that's very much determined by, either what music school you went to or if you didn't go to music school. So there are, there's kind of a Venn diagram where there's like a center of gravity is one of the circles, and that's DePaul Conservatory, and then one is Roosevelt, one is Columbia, and so you'll notice a lot of like big band stuff, a lot of I guess everybody's kind of in on the jobbing scene, but I don't know, there are kind of like flavors of musician that comes out of each of those camps. Yeah, a lot of the more accomplished like classical players, like for instance Columbia, who I love and work for, so this is not an insult, doesn't really put out classical players much.
Okay.
So most of the classical players are either DePaul or Roosevelt. Columbia's the only one of those schools that has a really developed pop music program. So a lot of the like young artists, like young hip artists, are Columbia. Anything with kind of a neo soul flavor, or like, all the people Chance worked with are all Columbia cats, so that has that like very particular sound, if you know what I mean.
Got you.
And then Roosevelt tends to lean classical musical theater, that sort of thing. So, and again, the groups are all amiable.
Yeah.
And then there's like the blues musicians. That's not there's no college associated with that. Mm-hmm. That's just like churches. A lot of people grow out of the gospel scene because playing gospel is incredibly technically difficult. Like there's a phrase that's gospel chops, which just means a drummer who can like play his ass off. Yeah, really fast.
Really? And
really technical stuff. Mm-hmm.
So the Chicago music scene is really expansive.
Yeah, but it's just interesting that there's kind of categories, again, is too strong. It's just like kind of lumps of people who associate with each other. And I don't mean it's not rivalrous or anything like that, but they're kind of distinct. And it's fun to be involved.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Describe your favorite restaurant in Chicago.
My favorite restaurant is, I'm kind of a creature of habit, and so I like places that will like, I know what I'm getting. It's not.
I'm kind of
like I enjoy. I can do the foodie thing. It's not my everyday.
Yeah.
But so my old standby is Brasa Roja, which is just a couple blocks away from here. It's a Colombian rotisserie chicken place, and it's
what's it called?
Brasa Roja.
Okay.
Huge. They've got like a huge steel rotisserie in there, and it's just I enjoy simple things done really well. Yeah. So it's just like the dishes are just like rice, beans, lettuce, onions, chicken, steak maybe. It's all kind of amalgamations of the same couple ingredients, but it's just done unbelievably well. It's totally reasonably priced. The people are extraordinarily nice. The coffee is unbelievable.
Oh yeah.
They're bizarrely proud of. I guess it's a Colombian restaurant. It makes sense. But they're so excited about their coffee. It's awesome.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'll have to go there and try. As
Yeah,
someone who enjoys coffee.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the kind of place where you can kind of get to know the staff too. It's the same people there for years and years. So Nestor cool. is my guy. He's always
Nestor.
Yeah.
Nice.
He's the guy who's excited about coffee.
Nice. So, what's your hidden gem in the city?
Hidden gem in the city. This is more a category than an actual place. But I've noticed somebody pointed one out. I mean, the one that's local here is a place called Jensen Park, which is this tiny, tiny little park. It's like less than a city block. And somebody pointed this out to me. I had to meet up with one of my friends during like the beginning of lockdown, and so it was like, all right, we're doing this fully outside. Like we're going to be wearing masks 20 feet away outside, And they're like, we could go to Horner Park, which is down here, and it's beautiful. Or there's this place called Jensen Park right by your place, which I'd never heard of. And it's this tiny little park that's like, it's like half a block. It's ridiculously small. Mm-hmm. And I started noticing that there's a lot of these in the city. Once I'd kind of been to one and was like, I'd walk past this place every day, and it never even registered on my radar.
Is it like one of those like playground parks?
It's it's half a block is bigger in Chicago than you would expect when it's all laid out.
Okay.
You know, when it's all out in front of you. But so there is a playground area for kids. There's a baseball diamond.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And then there's just a huge field.
Okay.
And like a couple of walkways and stuff like that. But yeah. But I've noticed there's a ton of those if you kind of know where they're like tucked in between apartment buildings
So
and stuff.
Jensen Park.
And there's there's all these tiny little hidden, I don't
spots
know.
all
Yeah,
around,
once
yeah.
I was like, once my eyes were open to the fact that these things existed, there's a ton just tucked in between apartment buildings, and some don't even look public necessarily.
Okay.
But yeah, they are. It's cool.
We got a nice clock here.
It's pleasant.
It's pleasant, spooky Halloween
Oh, yeah, that's
music.
right.
So, what sound do you most affiliate with Chicago?
The obnoxiously loud L
Yeah.
was because when I first moved here, I didn't have a car. I was broke, and they give you the U-Pass thing when you're a university student here. So that's you'd spend like 3 or 4 hours of your day on the L, and then for a while this probably, looking back, this seems like it was dangerous probably, but I used to get a kick out of walking through the alleys and stuff under the L rather than on the streets on my way to and from places. And it was just kind of a coincidence of the places I lived. Like I happened to live right by the L in Lincoln Park, about a mile north of Fullerton, which is right on the L. And so it was like, that was kind of the straightest shot, was to just walk under that vein on the way to the school.
Yeah.
And then everybody's had the experience of walking under the L, and you're just like, oh, like, how I've never heard anything this loud before.
Yeah, and you have to cover your ears, and you got like the sparks coming down.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. And then I've gotten to play around with that. I've done like audio editing for a couple short films that take place in Chicago.
Okay.
And you end up down there with like a boom mic in an alley, and so I don't know. That's the thing that sticks out.
Is there somewhere where you can just like buy an audio track of the Chicago L, or
There has to be, I'm sure.
Yeah.
The ones. Part of this was just I wanted the experience of doing field recording and stuff.
Okay.
So I have a stereo field recorder that I can take places, and it seemed like I knew I needed the interior of the L. Sorry, I'll tell you a little about the project. It's our buddy Dan Canvas, who's a very talented musician and filmmaker, made this thing. And a lot of it, the premise was basically he had seen a girl on the L and kind of instantly fell in love, and it was this kind of, it's not like they ended up dating at the end. It was just this kind of this moment of like interest and like these two like smiling at each other, and then interspersed with other things going on in his life. But that was the part that took place on the L. So I knew I needed very specific like interior sounds of the L. I knew she needed to get off at this exit for continuity to work. So I needed to get them saying like doors open on the right at Harrison or something like that. So it made more sense just to go record it all on my own. Right. And then while you're inside the train, you might as well step outside the train and get the same, get the outside noise. So I'm certain there's a sound library where you could find that. But I don't know. It was a fun field trip.
What music has influenced you most during your time in the city?
The easy question. We lived, I've lived with Sammy pretty much the whole time I've lived in Chicago. So when I say we, I mean Sam and I.
You two are like intertwined.
Yeah. We call it our unconsummated gay marriage.
Yeah.
We lived 2 blocks away from a place called Kingston Mines, which is this legendary blues club in Lincoln Park. And, you know it well, of course. And we happened to go to high school with some of the family that owns that place.
Okay.
And so we knew the door guy, and we knew one of the bartenders our like sophomore and junior years of college. And so we would get in for free and drink for, if not free, heavily reduced. And so, of course, we were there like every Thursday, Friday, every week for a year and a half or something like that. And it's strange because you don't listen to Bonelang and say like, that's a very bluesy band.
Right.
But something I'll never really be able to put my finger on it, I don't think, but like just the vibes of that place and the amount of experimentation and fun that the musicians were having on stage sunk in. And like the drummers are crushing too. Those are all gospel cats.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so like I think a lot of the rhythms work their way into Bonelang, so not like the guitar riffs or anything like that, although I kind of play bluesy naturally. But yeah, like I think a lot of the rhythms of that place kind of worm their way into the Bonelang stuff. So
that's cool. I would not have known that.
Yeah. But yeah, like I said, easy answer. That's number one for sure.
So what are you excited to experience again in the city?
Again, I feel like it's kind of a pedestrian answer because it's not like the raves or whatever, but it's like I really just. It's weird because the COVID thing is kind of overlapping with winter in a horrible way, where it's like you used to. The release was kind of like, oh, I'll go to the park, go for a walk or whatever, and now it's like that's done too.
Yeah.
So I really miss just having places to go at night when I'm
At night.
bored. Yeah.
Because
Those are the times you
parks
get
and stuff, or like bars and.
Yeah, I was gonna say like bars and movie theaters are the two that I really miss, because those are the like, all right, I've been working all day, I'm in my head.
Gotta get out.
I'm just restless, and yeah, you can only pace the same 40 feet of your apartment so many times before it's like, all right, I gotta like go, intake something new at the movie theater, or just like get some of the evil out at the bar or whatever. So man, I just miss.
Yeah, what do you think it will be like in the winter?
I think it's going to be horrible. It actually, one upside I realized is that we're not going to have to commute nearly as much. Like most of the time, the worst part about winter is if you're going to work, it's like 90 minutes from out your door, you're shivering your ass off. You get on the train, it's still pretty cold on the train. You get to work, finally get to warm up. It's just like those 3 hours don't exist anymore for a lot of people because they're working at home. So getting out of the house less, I'm hesitant to say that that's a good thing, but we'll have to deal with less cold, I guess.
Yeah, there'll be. I mean, it's gonna be really interesting. It's open a lot more now, the city, compared to like when it first shut down and everything. And it was really cold and gloomy. When it was,
it's pretty brutal. Those were like
the quarantine, like
early days too.
The early days of COVID.
So freaked out. I mean, I know it's touch and go now, but I just the panic and like the food shortages. And stuff, like Jesus Christ. And it's going to depend too on like nobody really knows what this ending looks like, if it ever ends or whatever. But there's a chance there's like a vaccine before the end of the winter, so that would totally change the dynamic too. I have no idea. I'm not holding my breath at all, but.
Yeah, we'll find out.
It just depends on the course of events here, sort of.
If you were given secret information that Chicago would be destroyed in 1 week, what's one quality you would choose to keep to rebuild the city?
Well, I mean, Chicago has been destroyed before. And so I feel like that... I know none of the same people are alive or whatever, but Chicago feels very resilient in that way. Or like the people who are in Chicago are staying in Chicago. It's kind of like... I remember... when Katrina happened for a while, like we had exchange students sort of.
Okay. Or
like, I guess refugees is a better word, where they were like, couldn't go home. And so they like ended up somehow in Naperville or whatever. And I remember hearing a lot of people being asked the question, like, are you going to go back? Why would you go back? This keeps happening, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And it's just like people from New Orleans are from New Orleans. That's their home, they're staying there, right? Yeah. And so I think they have kind of a similar vibe there, where it's like Chicagoans are Chicagoans. Chicagoans are just going to stay and rebuild. So I guess resiliency is really the answer to that, which is the perfect characteristic for a disaster, I suppose. Yeah. But yeah, I think it's built in, and it's not like I wouldn't worry about the city being destroyed, but it's the people seem like they could probably handle something like that if they absolutely had to.
Probably on a similar note, how do people respond when they learn you're from Chicago, and how do you?
Yeah, it depends if you're in the United States or not.
If you're in the U.S. and then abroad.
Yeah, so I mean, sports are the big one here, and even abroad. Like Michael Jordan was always, when I was younger, especially.
Yeah.
Michael Jordan was the one they pull out. So abroad, it's usually celebrities. It's like Michael Jordan, Oprah, Obama are the three. And then, let's see, I haven't really thought about how people feel about it here. There's a sad answer, which is the murder rate, unfortunately, is a huge part of a reputation. Which is true, but that's a weird one, because when people bring that up, you're worried they're going to be like afraid to visit or something like that. Which, I mean, the crime rate's insane here, but it's just like if you're don't visit the places where the murder rate is crazy. Yeah. Like, this is easy to plan your vacation. No one's
Right.
getting shot at the bean, sort of thing. Like
Yeah.
you can figure this out. So I think it's a shame because I think people probably pass the city up for tourism for that reason.
Yeah, I could see that too. Yeah.
And I mean the music thing, but that's because we hang out with musicians all the time. They just know Chicago's killing.
Yeah. It's a good time. It's a good time.
Yeah, I prefer that reputational mark.
So when you feel overwhelmed or in need of a mental escape, but you can't leave the city, where do you go to clear your mind?
Well, like we were saying, I guess the park is the best place I have at the moment.
Yeah.
And I'm in a weird spot now because, like I said, it was closed. Like the other day, I just had to get out of the house and like walk around, but it's starting to get, it was like 45 out or something like that. So I was like,
Okay.
the park is not going to be a fun, hour.
No.
Like it'll be tolerable for 10 minutes or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I ended up just walking around Home Depot.
Home Depot.
Because it's huge and I like
Yeah.
to pace. And there's cool stuff to look at or like come up with ideas or
Yeah.
whatever. So I don't have a good escape right now, unfortunately.
You'll come up with something.
Yeah, the best I have is Home Depot.
So what's your schedule look like? Like, because you and Sammy are in the studio.
Mhm.
What does your typical like week look like?
Changes a bunch. We try and leave it pretty flexible. It's more we're pretty good at beating ourselves up if we don't work enough. You know what I mean? So like
Yeah.
we don't really need to keep ourselves or each other to a clock or anything like that. So we've got
Yeah.
set stuff. Like I'm teaching now on Monday and Wednesday morning, and then I usually kind of dog ear a good chunk of that day to do like grading or whatever after class is over.
Mhm.
But beyond that, it's just kind of like it's a bit of a free for all,
Yeah.
honestly. And I think my mornings are the most scheduled out. I kind of have a routine thing, like get up, work out, and then on certain day, I've got like my week planned out basically, where it's like
What's
these days
your
I work
routine
out.
like? Your morning routine?
Sure. So it's get up, work out anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour, depending on what I'm doing, and then I like learn best in the morning, and I can pay attention best in the morning, because music burns you out pretty fast. So I try and get all like new information intake in
the morning?
So I'll like work out and then like shower, eat. So like work out 7 to 8, shower, eat somewhere between 8 and 9, and then somewhere in there I'll start like right now I'm doing. I've kind of got to up my game as far as mixing.
Okay.
Just because our mix engineer is busy, there's certain stuff he doesn't need to be working on that I can do, and it's been a while since I mixed stuff. So right now I'm like getting really back into the fundamentals of audio mixing and stuff like that. So it'll be like I kind of have scheduled out like Wednesday and Friday, 8 to 9. I'm working on mixing or whatever. Yeah, little stuff like that. I don't know. There's a bunch of little pockets of my life. I'm trying to. I got into the habit of working on Spanish over quarantine. That was just one of those weird, like
something you picked up?
everybody picked up something.
Yeah.
Everybody was like baking bread one week. I know a lot of people who lost a bunch of weight, that sort of thing. So my
Yeah.
thing was I just started listening to Spanish podcasts. So I've got like, I forget what day. It's like Thursday morning or whatever. It's just like hour of Spanish, that sort of thing. So it's like
Really?
the most regimented part of my day is from like 7 a.m. when I wake up to 11 a.m. And then after that, it's basically try and get in the studio for a few hours. And then depending on how it's going, I mean, you can't force that kind of thing. So it's like go down, try for at least 4 hours. And if it's
Yeah.
going well, that could last until I go to bed. Like that could
Yeah.
be from like 11 to 9. It's usually not. It's usually that wraps up at like dinner or whatever, like intensively
much-
working. And
how
then it's
much
hanging
time-
out, which blurs.
How much time do you guys spend on like the music and the tracks and just like getting?
Yeah, it's a good question. Mostly because like the lines in our life are so blurred that like, I mean, all our best friends are also our musicians. So like when we're hanging out with our friends, it's like half rehearsal or like editing session or composition or something like
Yeah.
that. So it's hard to say. I'd say like intensive, deliberately sitting down to work on music, it's probably 40 hours a week. And then there's probably another 20, 30 that are like somewhere in a gray area where it's like we're experimenting with something or we've got a weird idea for a video that we're just like rearranging the apartment for or something like
Yeah.
that. And everything ties, even like my hobbies are all music related to like, I'm working on restoring an old organ that we got kind of like weirdly gifted and like rebuilding a guitar. So like my downtime is still kind of music related, even when it's not like like sit down
Yeah.
and work. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's completely consumed our lives, I guess, is the short answer to the question.
Wow, that's interesting. For the music videos, how do you guys plan out, like what? Because each one is very different than the other,
Mhm.
and then some are produced or directed by someone else. And how
Yeah.
does that all work? How do you decide? Oh, let's do this one ourselves. Let's have someone else do this one, or
I'd say there's kind of two classes of music videos, where there are ones, we could call it like heavy production and light production, I suppose, where
Okay.
like the heavy production usually has at least some sort of script and like a very well delineated concept.
okay,
Do you know what I mean? Yeah, so there are very high concept videos and very kind of I don't want to say thrown together, because we always take our time, but they're a little more improvisational, where
Yeah.
it's like we come up with a scenario more than, or a setting
okay,
more than like a fully fleshed out emotional scenario.
Yeah.
So it'll just be like, okay, we've got a location and we have some props and we have the song and a crew. We kind of work with the same guys over and over
Yeah.
again. And then budget kind of delineates how much we're able to do with that
okay,
in terms of like lighting or multiple cameras or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it tends to be either like there is a serious amount of investment or there's virtually none.
Yeah.
It's just good ideas,
yeah,
hopefully well executed.
yeah. It's interesting.
Does that answer the question? I'm not sure if I...
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, it's like you have heavy production and then light production, and then the heavier production costs a lot more than the lighter is right here, and you just decide how to execute it. It's cool.
Yeah, and cost a lot of time as well. Like, you know,
Time.
the trilogy thing that we just did, Newly and Playboy are out. Something to Fix is coming next. That's like months and months of scripting, and like we had storyboards and stuff for that
Yeah.
one. So that's even... our stuff is never really that expensive. I mean, you do have to pay for a certain production value, but it's mostly, like, most of the production value is talent rather than like budget. It's just we work with really killer people who have really good ideas and can
Yeah.
like pull some shit together in a shoestring budget, basically.
Yeah.
Or call in favors, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So people are more valuable than things.
Absolutely, and it's the
Yeah.
best part of being an independent artist is if you don't... I mean, some people will charge you for everything, but for the most part, if you're not making a lot of money, most other artists are willing to collaborate with you for free because they're interested in getting their product out there.
Yeah.
And if there was a label who's willing to throw money at it, then they'll start charging you for stuff. But for the most part, people just want to work and make cool stuff and
Yeah.
yeah, be seen, sort of. I don't mean that in a selfish way, but it's...
You want to work with other talented people because
Yeah.
you know they're going places and you want to go places too, so why not
Right.
put our
Or-
minds together?
Yeah, and when I say be seen, like, I don't mean that everybody wants to be famous or whatever. It's just like, if you're making movies, you don't want to do that with no audience. You don't want to make
Yeah.
a movie that nobody's going to watch.
Yeah.
You want at least some people to check it out and like see what
Right.
you're up to, or it's kind of defeats the purpose. You know, I'm sure
Yeah.
there's therapeutic value in making art on you. Like, it's fun to just make songs for yourself, but it's a whole another level of rewarding when you can share it with somebody and they appreciate it.
Yeah. I imagine this will kind of be in that similar vein, but describe the best day of your life.
Best day of my life. I suppose, I guess it's like every year or so we get to play a show that's like bigger than the last one we did. And so it's strange because when I think best day of my life, I think like happiest, you know, but I suppose like when I think about a show day, it's mostly just like nervousness
Okay.
followed
yeah.
by relief. It's not like joy or
Yeah.
something like that. So if that feels like kind of a strange answer, but that is kind of like the most meaningful sorts of days where it's like
the fulfilling.
yeah, and there's this
meaningful
massive
ones.
crescendo of energy, right? Where it's
Yeah.
like rehearsals for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, and it's like everything gets busier and busier and busier, kind of leading to this like singularity of activity
Yeah.
that is show day. And then you wake up and it's all hurry up and wait. Like you want to be at the venue, but once you get there, you're just like twiddling your thumb
Yeah.
and just like waiting for people to show up. And then there's the whole question of like, all right, is the room actually going to fill up, or
Yeah.
you know, how many tickets? And you never find out. You have no idea how many tickets you sold until the day of, and they'll tell you how many pre-sales there were. But most people buy tickets like at the door or online the day of, and so you really have you can kind of like guess based on how well tickets are moving before the date how things are going, but you basically have no idea until you're off stage if you sold well, you know. It's just a crazy problem to have.
You perform the show, then they're like, oh, you guys sold out. Oh, you could have told us beforehand or something.
And half the time you're unhappy with the amount of people in the room, like 20 minutes before you go on. You're watching the opening act or whatever, and you're like, I hope this picks up. And it usually does. If they're there to see you, it usually picks up like right before you get on stage. And so, it's a very precarious position to be in.
So what's been your favorite venue that you've played at?
Oh, Metro's the best.
Yeah.
I like Thalia Hall a lot too, but I think we're just not quite big enough to make that room feel the way it should. You know what I mean? It always feels half empty, because it is.
Yeah.
But we've also never headlined there. We've only opened for other bands. And so I think eventually we'll get the opportunity to do it ourselves. And I think, by then the time will be right for that sort of thing. And I'm really excited. But Metro also has a vibe. Lincoln Hall is great too, just because the people are incredible.
Yeah.
The Lincoln Hall and Shuba's are like one ownership, and the people there are great. So I just gave you 4 answers to a question that.
And then you guys are going to play at Concord.
Mm-hmm.
How's Concord as a venue? I haven't been there.
I've never even been there.
Really?
Yeah, never set foot in there.
All right. You guys were scheduled to headline Concord. You've never been there.
No.
And but because of COVID.
I mean, that's how most shows work. I mean, especially when you're on tour. Like I've never been to the AE Center in Pittsburgh or whatever. You just show up and it's part of the gig. Kind of is just not knowing what's going to happen.
So this question I'm very curious about. What are the 3 most influential books you've ever read?
Do you have just any topic, like fiction, nonfiction, whatever?
It doesn't matter. Yeah.
All right, because we had this conversation the other day where you like nuggets of wisdom, right? From projects. So let me see if I can. So this is kind of a strange one. Because I'm not really an actor, I think it's called On the Art of Acting or something like that. It's like this classic of acting. It's by Michael Chekhov, and it's very it's kind of like meditative in a way. I don't know if you've ever done mindfulness meditation, where it's all about like being aware of things happening to you and kind of letting things happen to you without any ego sort of attached.
I meditate every day. I don't know if it's.
Gotcha.
I don't know what kind of meditation. I just do it.
Sure.
So.
And so the book is a lot about. The premise is kind of you can't really fake your way through acting. Like you can't just be like, oh, I'm going to look sad. You have to convince yourself that you're actually sad, and then you will look sad. Sort of. I mean, kind of dumbing this down a little because it's a long book, but so it's the practice of like. I don't know. It's like that meditation technique of paying attention to things that are happening to you, extended to slightly imaginary things. And so I don't really act that much, but it's a little like if you want to get good at something, you need to push yourself just up against where you're starting to screw up a little. Like maybe if you're trying to learn a piece before the concert, you play it a little too fast. Where it's not so fast that you're totally falling apart, but you're staying on that like edge of like proximal development. Do you know what I mean?
Okay.
And so I feel like adding that weird like extra creative element to the act of just being mindful of your surroundings. I feel like expanded my ability to be mindful of my surroundings even when I'm not acting. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I found that really interesting, and that's one of those where you like read a chapter and it screws with you for a couple days.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was a good one. What are 3 books, right?
Yeah.
Okay. There's a book called The Machiavellians by James Burnham, which is out of print and really, really rare, but you can find electronic versions of it.
Okay.
And it's
Machiavellians? Okay.
It's a political science book, and the premise is the first point the guy makes is basically every political statement has a real meaning and a formal meaning. And the formal meaning, the real meaning is what you're trying to accomplish, right? And then the formal meaning is what do you say in order to gin people's emotions up, basically.
Okay.
And so it makes this point with a couple things. It starts with a crazy, archaic, I think it's like Dante's De Monarchia, I think is the example, which is like a 500-year-old book. where it's like presumably the book is about building an ethical government, but really it's about Dante's personal gripes with his political rivals and like what he's trying to accomplish. And they do the same with, I think they use like the Democratic Party platform from 1932 or something like that, where it's like, and since it's detached from our reality, it's long enough ago, you can just see that it's all just crazy flowery language. So one of the points is like, if I say the phrase, "We believe in the preservation of human life," I could be pro Black Lives Matter, or I could be pro-life with that statement, right? It's not giving you any information about what I want to happen practically in the world.
Yeah.
It's just window dressing, basically. And so the point of the book explores a couple different thinkers who were very like kind of hard-nosed political scientists, but that was the big takeaway, was basic. And once you read that, you're on the lookout all the time for like, does what you're saying have any measurable content? Like, what are your goals? In a way, like, give me a number that we could reach. You know, like, not saying I disagree with this, I'm just using it as an example. Like, how much should teachers make? The answer to that question is always more. More is not a number, right? And so, I don't know, I just thought about it in terms of, like, practical political goals. I feel like a lot of people could use this information, because I think people get worked up about politics for silly reasons, basically.
Okay, let me digest this a little bit.
Sure.
So you read...
Yeah, that was a lot, sorry.
So the book, it's an older book. It uses...
It's maybe... So it uses an example that's 500 years old. The book was published in maybe the 40s, I think. Okay.
But we're far enough removed where, like... You're not going to, like, feel anything...
Yeah, you avoid the emotional content of today and being upset at Trump or whatever. Actually, I didn't notice this, but yeah, the distance between when the book was published and now is very helpful.
So there's distance, and then you learn about when people say something, there's like a real meaning and then a
formal is the way he says it.
So the book then, does it teach you, like, how do you apply it? After reading it, how differently can you apply it in life?
Well, there's no like practical guide necessarily to be like, this is bullshit, and this is... It's more just like you start asking yourself the question, does this... like I said, is there a way that, qualitatively or quantitatively, is there a way that we could measure the effect that you're looking for or what this person is doing? You know, it's just, you start thinking of politics in terms of concrete outcomes, basically, rather than like what sounds good, I suppose. Is...
Yeah, so in our world of sensationalism and headlines and clickbait, it can help you decipher like what's real and what's not.
Or what, not even what's real, because something can be real and irrelevant, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So both what's actually relevant, I guess, more than true, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah. I think you'd like it, actually.
Well, that's why I'm asking these questions about it. Yeah. Okay, what's a third one?
This is not really a book, but I kind of have like a vague interest in philosophy. Like, I'm not really well read, but I keep getting kicked back to the like classics. It's like every philosopher, you know, it's like if you start at Marx and you think you're going to read Marx, it's like, okay, but Marx is built on Hegel, so you got to go back and read Hegel, and then Hegel's responding to Kant, so you got to go back and read Kant, and then Kant is responding to Aquinas, who's responding to Aristotle. So I keep getting kicked back to the Greeks.
Okay.
And I recently did Plato's Apology, which is it's supposedly a transcript of Socrates' defense of himself while he was on trial for his life.
Okay.
And it's first of all, it's crazy moving, because I was reading Plato and it's all very dry and like, what is the meaning of justice? Is this justice? Well, I don't know. What about this thing or whatever? It's all super dry. And then it's just a crazy like tour de force of oratory, I guess. And it's really affecting, just on like a kind of like a fictional level. It's not, well, it's semi-fictional at least. Possibly completely fictional, but it's very rousing, and it's also I think every culture kind of gets to decide what its sort of like creation myth is, if that makes sense.
Okay.
I don't know, like I'd say the modern Democratic Party, the way it sees itself now is like as it was born of the civil rights movement, right? The Democratic Party sees that as its best self and like kind of places that like, that was the moment that the Democratic Party became the Democratic Party that we recognize.
Okay.
The Republicans are a little harder, maybe just because they've changed a lot more in the last couple of years. Like the old Republican Party of like Bush and Reagan, that would be like maybe their creation myth is like Teddy Roosevelt, the Great White Fleet or whatever, this like show of American force, but also caring a lot about the homeland and breaking up monopolies and stuff like that. So I think every group kind of gets to pick its own creation myth. And when I say myth, I don't mean that it's false. It's just a nice turn of phrase. Creation myth.
Yeah.
They get to decide how to tell their story, and where that story starts, I think, is very telling and can tell you a lot about a group. And I think it's very interesting because there were philosophers before Socrates, so we could start there, right? Or you could start with Aristotle instead of Socrates, who's a little further along, right? But I think there's something telling about Socrates, who was executed for just teaching people what he thought. Basically, he was executed for undermining the authorities of Greece at the time.
Okay.
And I think there's something very telling about kind of, I don't know, I'm not sure what it is. I just think there's probably something in that fact. Like, that seems very poignant to me. That whoever the people are that made the decision that here's where we're starting philosophy, we're like, no, you need to learn this lesson. Like, first of all, be careful because they might chop your head off. And also, it's important that people are able to say shit that their quote unquote superiors don't agree with.
Yeah.
Right. And often those people who are rocking the boat are proven right by history. So I think that's fascinating.
Do you ever think about the city of Alexandria, and there was this library that had like everything in it, right? And then it burned.
Mm-hmm.
How much do you think we don't know?
I know. It's like if I could change one thing about history, I would think real hard about that one.
Yeah.
Because it's even the stuff we have from people like Aristotle, like we know it's fragments because there are other works referenced in the surviving works where it'll be like, I don't know, whatever, Metaphysics Volume 3, and it's like, that doesn't exist, we don't have it, so we know it, we know there was one, and like there's lots of, especially for people older than Socrates, we've only got bits and pieces, like literally lines, because it'll be quoted by somebody who came later, so we know they had the book, they read it, put it in their book, but the original book is gone, like we have no idea what was in between the couple quoted things that are in there. So yeah, I think you're totally right. I can't even imagine. Like, that might be the thing that you could do to change the course of human history the most drastically, if you could change one thing.
Yeah, probably,
like,
right?
Let that burn down. Yeah, I think so.
Oh,
man. Mm-hmm.
Huh.
And so much of that was lost from Europe during the Dark Ages. Like, people just didn't have access to that literature, basically.
So I don't know if this is true or not, but like during the Crusades, that's when Europe started getting more of these texts, or
I don't know. This is just going to be dumb outline sophomoric history because I'm not a history major. But yeah, from what I understand, most of it was kept by the Muslim world. Basically, they just had a better sort of scientific/intellectual culture at the time when Europe was going through the Dark Ages. And so rather than burning books, they would keep them and copy them. Mm-hmm. So a lot of what we have are basically like Persian world copies of Aristotle and stuff, and those were like the original. When they were reintroduced to Europe, they were because the Muslims had held on to them basically for us.
Yeah, it's wild. So what's something you're curious about recently?
Here's a weird answer. I've been going deep on the history of Chile. Recently, I'm fascinated. The country, Chile.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
I should have been more specific.
It's about how you pronounce it. That's why I was thrown off. Yeah.
No, I'm just being a gringo. Chile. which I'm not totally sure how I got there. I think it's South America just has a really interesting political culture. Like it overlaps in so many ways with like they kind of have the same revolutionary history with a very strange, like sort of hierarchy, like social hierarchy. Like there's a lot of old like remnants of aristocracy down there that are interesting, and like a heaping helping of Marxism that the United States doesn't really have. So like the whole 20th century was just bonkers for South America. And then I realized I don't know anything about Pinochet, who was the military dictator of Chile in this, like, basically the entire 70s. And he's hard to find stuff on in English, actually, strangely, which just seemed weird to me because he's an important figure in South American history. And so I just, somehow that dragged me in this weird rabbit hole of Chilean history. So now I'm reading about the Chilean Revolution and stuff, and it's bonkers.
Can you give me a summary of what you're learning?
The most interesting part, I mean, I'm kind of not interested in like the names and I'm never going to remember everybody because there's a ton of people involved, but like the thing that struck me the most was what I was talking about before. Is like there's this weird class architecture sort of where when Chile was conquered, there's interbreeding between the European settlers and native Mapuche is the largest like native group, or best known at least in Chile. And then you get this kind of loose caste system where it's like mestizos, including indigenous people or mixed people at the bottom, what were called Creoles, which would have been Spanish-born people of Spanish descent born in Chile, and then Peninsulares, which are people from Spain, right? Okay. And so this weird caste system gets set up in early Chilean history that kind of never goes away. Although it's hard to tell if they're the same people or if we're just calling this like, well, there was an upper class then and a lower class then, and there's an upper class now and a lower class now. But it's hard to tell whether those two things are tied together. But that legacy seems to be an important streak in Chilean political history, and like
interesting.
A lot of the what would be called sort of like blue blood population is very pro Pinochet, who was like crazy right-wing authoritarian, and had this very strange semi-capitalist economics sort of thing. So, but it's just like these, you can see the threads from the 1600s up until the 1970s very distinctly, and it's fascinating. Yeah.
Do you think you can, of a lot of countries in the world, you can see those threads from 1600s or before, or just like throughout history and where they are now?
Yeah, I think it's hard to. I mean, some countries it seems less important, but there's always weird kind of remnants. Like England still has a king and stuff, which is crazy. It's just like, but that's kind of trivial. Like it's weird and it's a goofy use of money and stuff. It's kind of charming, but that one doesn't seem to affect daily, like the fact that there's 4 aristocrats left in England doesn't necessarily seem to be like a major social force, whereas obviously somewhere more rigid like India or whatever, like that caste system is ancient and pervasive still. And again, you don't know how much you're imagining. Like I was saying, I'm not sure that there's a direct, like a defensible direct line from old world aristocracy to new world aristocracy that's worth thinking about.
There's so much to learn about the world that we don't know
it's
about.
Ridiculous, man. Yeah. And that was part of the reason I got into this too, is I kind of know the broad outlines of a lot of the weird communist revolutions and stuff in South America, and I went to Cuba a couple of years ago and like kind of did a deep dive into that sort of stuff.
Interesting.
And then realized like there's this almost perfect foil to it, which is Pinochet and his kind of counter revolution that I didn't know anything about and needed to, felt the need to get into.
Well, thanks for sharing that. I appreciate that little deep dive. I like that.
Yeah, I told you it was a weird one.
Getting back to Chicago a little bit, within the past 5 years of living here, what personal realization has improved your outlook on life the most?
I don't know that this has improved my outlook, but it's improved my life, so I'm going to go with it.
Okay.
Which was I'm not sure I'm going to have good examples of this, but I used to like, for me, the word fear was always it meant a very specific thing, like shaking in your boots, you know.
Yeah.
And I realized one day that I think myself and also a lot of other people are just like living with fear in a lot of different ways, which can manifest as a lot of different things, where it's just like, oh, I don't want to go do that. Could be, I don't want to go to that party because I'm afraid of being the only person I know or something like that. And so fear always felt like an intense word for something like that. Like, I'm not cowering in the corner because I don't want to go to the party, but there are sort of, you could say there are different varieties of fear, like anxiety or trepidation or like terror or something like that. And it's just like a lot of things that kind of live in that category I noticed were like running my life a lot more than I wanted to.
Okay.
And I think I noticed this like 2 or 3 years ago. And again, I don't have a formula for this. It's not like I'm perfect at sussing this out in my own life. It was just like, once I became awakened to the possibility that this might need to be something I need to pay attention to in order to like fully actualize that sort of thing. I just started paying a lot more attention to it and kind of noticing it in strange ways.
So was it being aware of, oh, in this moment why am I thinking negatively or frightened by this, and then just in that moment changing your attitude towards something that you're afraid of? Or
if you can kind of call yourself out for being scared, if it's like, I don't want to go play sports with my friends because I'm bad at softball, that might manifest me as like talking about how softball's stupid and adults shouldn't play softball. And if you would just admit to yourself, no, you're afraid, you idiot, and then you can talk yourself, because then you're like, well, shut up, asshole, go, don't be afraid, don't be ridiculous.
So I feel like this is something that happens to everybody. And you're right, it bleeds over to so many different things, and like bartending, I overhear conversations, and it's like they'll say something about this, but really there's something way deeper that and it's just manifesting itself in this form.
Or it's crazy. I see so many people who are just, I mean, this is kind of cliche, but just like stuck in, there's a part of their life that they absolutely hate and for whatever reason can't extract themselves from. Like a bad job is the most common example, probably. There's a paycheck that they're tied to, but also there's just the fear of looking for something else. Like you might have to learn a bunch of stuff, and it's going to be, painful, in a manner of speaking, to have to go through that, and also kind of like burn off whatever sense of identity you have connected to this job. Like if it's a high status job, for instance, you're going to lose that. Like I think the main thing that keeps people ensnared is fear, basically. When I realized, I always kind of knew that about other people, but then I realized it about myself. And that helped a lot. Oh, it was not fun.
Oh man.
Yeah, that's why I said I forget exactly how the question was asked. Oh, it didn't improve my outlook, but it did improve my life. It did improve my outlook, but it's a kind of a pessimistic thing to notice.
So what were the first things you did, like, to take action on it?
I don't remember. I think it tied into, I talked about this before, where it was just like, what are you not doing? Like, there's that thing that lives in the back of my head, and I've gotten into the habit of asking myself that. I for a while I printed out a note card and had it on my dresser, but after, you just stop seeing that stuff after a while. But it was, what are you avoiding doing? And that was like my little anxiety mantra, where it'd be like, if I just neglected to get a new headlight for my car for like 3 months. Why? I don't think that one was fear, but there's like some weird hump that I'm not getting over. Or it's like, if you've ever, like I've been meaning to make a doctor's appointment for like 3 months. And so you set that date, you're like, I'll make the call on Tuesday. And then you don't make it on Tuesday. And then the further along you get, the more it's like, oh no, it's too late. You're just like talking yourself into these weird excuses for not doing the thing that you're leaving undone. And so,
what's weird in my experience is like, now that I think about it right now, like I really don't have much of this problem right now, but for a long time I would like write something in my planner, like Tuesday, do this.
Yeah.
And then it just like it shows up. That one thing
Mm-hmm.
shows up in my planner week after week after
Yep.
week after week after week after week, and it's always on my mind.
Mm-hmm.
It's more painful to have it on my mind than to actually
Exactly.
do it.
Yeah, this is exactly what I was talking about. There's that thing that's just like nagging
Yeah.
you, and it's not conscious. It's not like ruining every second of your life. There's
Yeah.
just it's like the noise floor or like the kind of like ambient anxiety that you're living with is just higher than it should be, and that can push you into a threshold like above
Yeah.
the threshold that's tolerable. If you have something actually dire happen, that can push you from like being able to manage it to like I've never had a panic attack, but it's certainly possible that could be the thing that just like pushes you over the edge and like
Yeah.
full blown mayhem.
Wow. Interesting.
So yeah, I'm very careful about that stuff now.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
On the flip side, what's something you're excited about over the next 3 years?
Cool. The easy answer is I'm excited for music to come back. It'll be nice to play again. I'm excited. I really like this part of my life. First of all, I have designed a life for myself that I don't have to do a whole lot of shit I don't want to do, which is awesome. Which is, I think, the main anxiety people have, kind of like early 30s. They're like feel like they're getting swept into careers that they're not interested or whatever. But mine, I once had a friend. He's older than us. We were talking to him about getting older. We're like, "How are your 30s, man?" He's like, "It's great. They're like my 20s, but with money." And so that's what I'm excited about. Actually, is like I've kind of stabilized a little. Being a musician is really difficult to make tenable financially. You've got to do a lot of shitty jobs you don't want to work. I'm still going to have to do some of that, I'm sure. But I don't know. I feel like I've leveled off a bit. And like I said, I got a friend who just bought property, and that's now starting to feel like a thing that might be on the horizon, which is exciting. And again, it's all just in the name of being able to make music indefinitely. Just like get yourself to a financial spot where you can kind of even your wings out or whatever. I'm mixing metaphors at this point, but yeah. And I think the post-COVID, whatever happens post-COVID, is going to be really interesting, because whenever there's like a weird economic contraction and challenge, watching how people now we have all this technology that we've all mastered that we didn't have before. We're all going to be better equipped for the world following. So that's what I'm excited about.
All right. Well, thanks for sitting down with me today. We're here in your neighbor's place, but
Yeah, thank you, Rich.
it's been great. Thanks again.
Hell yeah.
Thanks for listening to Rich Conversations. Again, you can follow Matt at Bonelang and at Matt Bones DIY. Have a fearless day.